All right, yeah. Hello? We're good?
Let's go.
All right. Good afternoon, everybody. Look at this. Obviously one of the highlights of the day, standing room only. Delighted to be here with you. My name is Paul King. I'm the Chief Executive of Built by Nature. I have a very important role in this session, which is basically to stand here and crack the whip and try and keep us to time, which is probably the hardest bit of all. But anyway, without any further ado, let me very quickly introduce this session and we will move on. So what we're here doing now is looking at accelerating buildings breakthrough, looking at solutions for addressing whole life carbon, circularity, and a shift to bio-based materials. Now, this obviously builds on earlier sessions in the day, looking at sufficiency, looking at the stocktake report we've just been hearing about. We all know, of course, I'm sure you all know, that the built environment accounts for about 40% of total greenhouse gas emissions. We also know that about a quarter of that, around 10% of global greenhouse gas emissions, arrive from the embodied carbon that go into our building materials. So whether or not we are looking at new buildings or the refurbishment of existing buildings, it is critical that we think carefully about the materials we use. We also know that over the next 30 years, we're going to be doubling the footprint of our built environment. As somebody else has said, that's the equivalent of building a new Paris every week between now and 2050. These are pretty startling statistics that we repeat and I think become slightly numb to. But it's critical that we think about having the tools, the frameworks that we need to inform our decisions about the material choices that we make. We also need that to enable real like-for-like comparison between the likes of cement, steel, timber, and other materials. So that's what we're going to be hearing about. And of course, we hope all of that will inspire greater and faster policy and industry action. So without any further ado from me now, I'm going to hand over to Gulnara Roll, who you've probably already met, who is the head of Global ABC and the UNEP Cities Unit, to introduce our keynote speaker. Thank you, Gulnara.
Is my slide? No?
Yes, so on, does it work? Yes. Yeah, so on behalf of the Global Alliance Building Construction, so the head secretariat, really great to see you. So it is really a big pleasure to introduce today our keynote speaker. So his keynote speaker is Shinichi Goto, who is the Deputy Director General of MLT Japan, to provide the keynote speech. Please.
Okay, thank you. My slide? Okay. Okay, so good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. Okay. My slide. Keynote speaker, yes. I'm Goto, Deputy Director General of MLIT Japan. It's my great honor to be given this opportunity to present today. And also, I would like to express my gratitude to the organizers, Global ABC, and all the stakeholders and attendees present here. In our country, as well as globally, we have been promoting building energy efficiency policy, focusing on its usage stage. However, considering that nearly 40% of the world's CO2 emissions come from buildings, it is insufficient to focus on only energy efficiency. Therefore, there's an increasing need for a whole-life carbon approach, which aims to reduce CO2 emissions throughout the entire process, from the cradle to the grave. I mean, from construction to demolition. Today, I'd like to introduce the current status and challenges of the WLC approach in Japan. Okay. Yeah. Next, please. Okay, first, I'd like to introduce an overview of the background of our discussions. We have a long history on WLC approach, starting with the WLC guideline and the CO2 intensity database. developed in 2013 by the Architectural Institute of Japan, AIJ. Then, in 2022, an upfront carbon calculation tool based on the AIJ guideline was developed with the initiative of major real estate companies. Following these initiatives, Zero Carbon Building Promotion Council was established through a collaborative effort between industry, government, and academia. This council initiated a comprehensive discussion of WLC approach and the development of CO2 intensity database. Next slide, please. In October, the Zero Carbon Building Promotion Council unveiled the Japan Carbon Assessment Tool, we call JCAT, a life cycle CO2 calculation tool specifically designed to account for Japanese building conditions. JCAT is available free of charge and is expected to significantly advance the implementation of WLC approach. Moreover, a notable achievement of JCAT is to promote a common understanding of WLC approach methods among various stakeholders. Next slide, please. To accelerate the institutionalization of the WLC approach and the development of CO2 intensity databases, such as environmental product declarations, two significant councils have been established this autumn. One is the EPD Promotion Council, made up of building material and equipment manufacturers, relevant ministries, and academia. Its purpose to build capabilities and share knowledge for the development of comprehensive CO2 intensity database. The other is the Interministerial Liaison Meeting for Building Life Cycle Carbon Reduction, organized by the Cabinet Secretariat. This meeting aims to accelerate discussions towards WLC regulation by involving related ministries. Through these efforts, we will develop a roadmap for institutionalization by next April. This roadmap is expected to clearly demonstrate the government's commitment to various stakeholders. Now, I want you to take note that we have numerous issues to address, such as the harmonization between zero emissions and resilience in our country. As you may know, Japan is one of the most earthquake-prone countries in the world. Buildings in Japan must have greater structural strength than in other countries. So consequently, the usage of structural materials such as steel and concrete is relatively high, which poses challenges from WLC perspective. So we believe it is essential to find the optimal balance between whole life carbon and resilience in Japan. Therefore, we are endeavoring to construct systems founded on multi-stakeholders engagement, aiming to overcome various obstacles through collaboration between industry, government, and academia. The effective implementation of the WLC approach is critical. We continue to be committed to working in concert with countries facing similar challenges, as well as with nations and international organizations possessing advanced expertise. Okay, thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and it's very impressive. Please don't go away, Mr. Kenichi. We're going to have a very quick group photo. Could I ask all of our session speakers, please just to step to the front for a very quick photo, please? Thank you. I think we'd all agree it's fantastic to see such a comprehensive system being introduced in Japan, and I'm sure that we can all take from that. So thank you again. Thank you very much. Thank you very much again, Mr. Shinichi Goto. Much appreciated. Right, now, I now need to crack the whip and move us forward. Thank you very much. So we're going to hear very, very briefly from the first two of our tools and frameworks looking at life cycle analysis and whole life. So I'm going to introduce Emma Lappalainen from Fin Group Consultants and Harry Mills from the Centre of Natural Materials Innovation at Cambridge. Please come up to the front and introduce our first two solutions. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Emma Lappalainen. I am from Fin Group Consultants, and I'm here on behalf of the Ministry of the Environment of Finland. And I will talk about the 10 whole life cycle recommendations for the buildings breakthrough. Oh. Went somewhere. Sorry. As many of you know, the buildings breakthrough was launched at COP28. Currently, 28 countries have committed to its objectives, resilience and near zero emissions in the building sector to reach the Paris Agreement goals. The Global IBC Materials Hub, including its two parallel working groups, the Whole Life Cycle Policy Coalition that is led by the United Kingdom and the World Business Council for Sustainable Development, and the Circle Built Environment Group, led by the Ministry of the Environment of Finland and RMIT University from Australia, developed the 10 whole life cycle recommendations for the buildings breakthrough through an extensive stakeholder engagement process that engaged over 100 professional, academic, and industry professionals from all over the world to help countries and stakeholders to address the whole life cycle impacts when implementing the buildings breakthrough objectives. By scanning the QR code on the right, you will be able to study the whole text of the 10 whole life cycle recommendations. Of the whole life cycle recommendations, the recommendations 1 to 7 cover different priorities, including, for example, the alignment of definitions internationally, as well as promoting universal standards, the importance of open source data, voluntary benchmarks, investments, and international cooperation. And the whole life cycle recommendations 8, 9, and 10 cover the 3 sides of circle built environment, prioritizing retrofitting instead of building new, including, for example, identification of vacant spaces in our existing building stock to be used for new purposes, material circularity, including, for example, reuse and recycling of building materials, products, components, and appliances, as well as design for circularity, which includes, for example, design for disassembly and design that allows for recycling and reuse of building materials. The Materials Hub launched in June this year, the 10 whole life cycle recommendations for the buildings breakthrough case study platform that engages with countries and stakeholders and shares examples that demonstrates the different topics of the use of the different topics of the 10 whole life cycle recommendations in practice, and also encourage their use in other contexts around the world. The 10 whole life cycle recommendations toolkit was also will be launched soon on the OPN website. It will feature selected case studies, and by scanning the QR code, you will be able to read the draft version of the toolkit and read the different case studies, and also submit your own case study. The 10 whole life cycle recommendations are valid for all countries, to the global south and the global north alike. And from this map, you can see that we have already received case studies from all over the world. And we strongly encourage you to also submit your case studies so that we can obtain a critical mass of case studies. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Hope you're well. I'm going to do a quick fire through the Bio and Earth-based compendium. This is an initiative which was soft launched in July by the Bio-based Materials Working Group, which sits under the Materials Hub. This is co-chaired by the Centre for Natural Material, University of Cambridge, myself, and Juan Acapino at the Centre of Engineers in Argentina. The Bio and Earth-based Materials Compendium is a collection of projects that demonstrate the capabilities of natural materials used in buildings and construction, highlighting sustainable and regenerative building practices, with a focus on projects that empower local and regional communities. The compendium seeked applications for two types of product categories: products of structural and non-structural applications and buildings of all typologies. Projects were reviewed and selected based on material sourcing and processing methods, design and innovation, community, gender and social aspects, scalability, and stakeholder value chain integration. From this process, we have selected for this initial publication 34 projects from 21 countries, 13 of which reside in the Global South, comprising of 16 products and 19 buildings. The selected projects consist of approximately 30 different types of natural materials, byproducts and recycled elements, ranging from plant-based grass, wood and other fibers to earth, adobe and compressed blocks, ram to stone and clay. For this session, due to the time, we will fly through two projects of the top scored from the reviews. For the product category, we selected Typhid Board, which is a project from Germany. This creates sustainable building materials from type of plant, cattail grass, focusing on eco-friendly and suitable for low-tech, decentralized production, minimalist processing, and terrific transferability across the world. Typhid Board comprises of two natural materials, the grass and or clay, which are locally sourced and processed. The product has significant R&D development initiated in the mid-2000s and is demonstrated in the RONI project and significant funding from the German federal government. 2 patents are secured, one for the cutting techniques and for the particle orientation of the fibers. For the building category, we selected the Rwanda Institute for Conservation Agriculture, or RICA, by Mass Design Group. The project is the first climate-positive university globally, focused on training leaders in conservation agriculture in East Africa. The campus is built primarily using local natural materials, of which 96% come from Rwanda, supporting the country's agricultural development priorities. Natural materials include timber sourced from Rwanda's only FSC-certified forest, with on-site grading for the structural use, compressed earth blocks and rammed earth and stone were sourced from a local quarry within 10 miles, and terracotta and brick produced from coffee husk waste within a 40-mile radius. Just to wrap up, I'll be welcoming anyone here, and for those online, if you could come tomorrow to several sessions which we'll be hosting at the REA Pavilion located in D7. I'll be going in depth to the compendium. We'll also have presentations on the Built by Nature Prize and a few other things, and presentations on net zero timber construction, pioneering regenerative cities, with a panel discussion on that. I'll hand it over to Paul now, and thank you very much. Sorry. I did forget. I would like to thank the wonderful technical review committee. They put a lot of time into this. They were globally, from around the globe, ranged from academics to industry leaders, and we're a fantastic bunch to work with, Paul. So there you go.
Thank you, Harry, and thank you, Emma. I appreciate we're putting people through it here in terms of enormous amounts of work in a very short period of time. So do to try and catch up with those sessions at the REA stand, D7 tomorrow, and you will hear a lot more. Okay, now the next session is we're going to have a bit of a panel, which is going to be moderated by Nazakat from Azimli from Laudas Foundation, known to many of you. If I'd like to invite the speakers for the panel to come up: Chiaka Okimura from AGC Asia Pacific, Peter Vangsbo from Arup, Nasrananda from the Kenyan Green Building Society, George Taras from the Ministry of Environment, Climate Change and Forestry, Kenya, and Samantha Stratton-Short. Please do come and join us at the front.
Thanks a lot, Paul. Okay, really excited to dive into some questions and get some insights from each of you. Is it working? Yes, it's working. We're close to the end. Okay, super. Okay, we're all set. I will start with my first question. I would like to turn to Ms. Chiaki Okimura from AGC and ask about the low-carbon glass range, which represents a direct effort to reduce whole-life carbon impacts from buildings. Can you tell us a bit more on how AGC balances performance, cost, and sustainability in its development, and what role such products play in meeting the industry's net zero targets?
Hello, everyone. Thank you for having me here today. And my name is Chiaki Okimura from AGC. AGC is a Japanese glass and chemical manufacturer. And before answering to the question, I want to highlight one important stuff. The value and the role of the low carbon glass is very varies by region. In Europe, so it's aligned with the policies. But think of the Southeast Asia, the role of the low carbon glass is still the extra feature. That's why I want you to understand that my answer here today is only focused on the Europe, not South Asia, not Japan and something like that. Okay.
Can you please speak closer to the mic? Oh, okay. Just here.
So, is it okay? Okay. So, okay. Okay, thank you. The recent years, like industry, the initiative, like Global ABC and the World Green Council, as well as the national policies, there is emphasizing to minimize the whole life carbon. And as a building material, the manufacturer, that we also support that trend very much. In addition, the AGC has the target to reduce scope 1 and 2 and 3, and the reducing carbon emission by 2030 and the net zero by 2050. And the low carbon glass support to achieve our target of CO2 emission reduction. And not only the CO2 reduction, the low carbon glass contributes to reduce the biodiversity impact. They also are increasing the material circularity. That's why in AGC, the low carbon glass is kind of the toolkit to achieve the AGC's entire environment strategy. So in terms of the balancing with the cost, that is the part that the low carbon glass is a bit expensive than the traditional glass. But we believe that's the environment benefit can be offset with the cost. Okay, that's all I can say. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I would like to move next to Nasra Nanda from Kenyan Green Building Secretariat and move also into the broader whole life cycle recommendations. So the 10 whole life cycle recommendations help countries to address whole life cycle impacts and to utilize circularity when implementing the building's breakthrough priority actions in order to reach the Paris Agreement goals. How do you see that the 10 whole life cycle recommendations fit with the green building rating tools that you use in Kenya? Can you please contextualize it for us?
Thank you. Firstly, good morning, and thank you so much for joining us. I think by integrating the recommendations, what it does is it enhances the effectiveness of our existing frameworks. So far we work a lot with at the IFC Edge tool. We also work with Green Star and LEED. And we're now working with the Architectural Association of Kenya to create a local rating tool called the Safari Green Building Index. And what we're trying to do is enhance what we're already doing. And hopefully, it also becomes useful in terms of reporting our progress. As you know, Kenya is now, and I'm very proud to say this, the vice chair of the Buildings and Climate Troika, if you like. So we will be having a workshop now exploring what different stakeholders are doing. And one of the key components of that is, the whole life cycle component. So I think what is important is in enhancing it, we'll also be able to kind of create a strategy that translates. What does it mean for Kenya in terms of commitments, in terms of what we need to do to leverage partnerships and investment, and of course, impact. And so I think it's a very useful tool in kind of opening up that conversation in a very intentional way. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And now, moving into the global perspective with Peter Wangsbo from Arup, I would like to ask you, Peter, how can we standardize whole life carbon assessments globally to ensure that there is consistency and comparability across the projects and regions?
Yeah, thank you so much. It's really a good question, and it has required a lot of work until now by many different stakeholders. But of course, a very obvious way is try to come around and speak about definitions. What type of assessment criteria do we have today? The assessment methodology that we are using, the A1 to the A5 and so forth. But also, how do we define this? What is the actually net zero definition? We need to touch upon the operational aspects, the embedded carbon aspects. We definitely need to touch upon the renewable energy mix. Let me give an example. In the Nordic, we have a very ambitious climate target for our buildings: 12 kilogram per square meter per year. This is only been able to reach this level because of our 70% renewable energy mix. When we are increasing our renewable energy mix in Denmark, this target will further decrease. And it will decrease already from next year down to 7.5. So the operational aspects of our definition is linked to our national standards. Also, all the aspects I mentioned here, operational, embedded carbon, the renewable energy mix, it's not enough. We also need to talk about and define how do we decarbonize, how do we actually use carbon capture to make sure that we include the last part of it. We have been working with the World Business Council of Sustainable Development on a market transformation action agenda, setting some really clear step on how we work with these methodology, how we work with the entire supply chain, because we need to gather the entire supply chain in order to address this. I hope I'm not taking too much time. I just want to say that Arup's commitment in this agenda was defined during COP26. All our projects that we are designing, from buildings to bridges to roads, they all do whole life cycling carbon assessment. Our methodology is we encourage dialogue around it. We want to share our knowledge that we have obtained. And without this transparent knowledge exchange, we're not leading to anywhere. So my strong commitment to everybody is, let's be open, let's be transparent on our methodology and share our practice. That's at least one of the recommendations for our side on how we secure a harmonized whole life cycling carbon approach.
Thanks a lot for your input, Peter. I would like to bring in a bit more perspective from the bio-based materials and the forestry angle with Mr. George Torres. Could I ask you, Mr. Torres, Kenya has immense potential in leveraging bio-based materials given its rich biodiversity and innovative community initiatives. From your perspective, what are the key opportunities for scaling up the bio-based materials in Kenya's construction industry? Additionally, what strategies or partnerships would you recommend to overcome the barriers and enhance their adoption?
Thank you very much for that question. Good afternoon, esteemed participants. Real quick, like you said, Kenya is in the process of relooking at its built environment. And part of the considerations that we are plugging into that space is the use of the bio-based material. And through the FCLP coalition and other actors within Kenya, we are looking at some of the emerging opportunities. Kenya is in the process of putting up quite a number of huge affordable housing program that for us that presents an opportunity to test this bio-based material in the construction. As I was, of course, also reading further about the built environment, I realized historically Kenya as a country have in one way or the other been using the bio-based materials. Talk of the grass-thatched houses and all that. And I believe my colleague from the Green Society should be more advanced and more detailed in the history that the country has before. So in terms of the opportunities that are there, we are looking at a policy framework that could create opportunities for private sector investments, because our thinking as a country is we are calling it the whole of government giving in the right policy environment, the private sector plugging in their resources and technologies so that we're able to move forward in a very coherent way. Of course, being backed up with an ambitious restoration program that would also be able to supply adequate materials for the bio-based industry to thrive. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And could I please turn now to Ms. Samantha Stratton from UNOPS to ask how you're working with countries, governments, and other organizations to incorporate whole life carbon approaches into regional decarbonization roadmaps for the built environment.
Thank you for that question, and I think it's skipping. Thank you for inviting us to participate on this panel. I've been very inspired so far by my colleagues up here. And just to start with, so UNOPS is a bit unique in the UN system because we are the implementers. We have mandates in infrastructure, procurement. We work in project management. Basically, we support everyone to actually deliver. And so what we have been up to is figuring out how to mainstream climate into everything we do. So not just us as an organization, but through our projects, we realize we have a huge opportunity to help suppliers, to help our partners to actually understand what to do, both in decarbonization, mitigation, but also in resilience. So some of the things that we are doing now is climate screening for both mitigation and adaptation on all of our projects, but also just looking at tools and processes that actually will help our partners to know what to do on their projects. And I think similar to some of my colleagues, this capacity building is really key. We don't just see it as the project, we see it as the whole process of sensitization and growing awareness. So that's sort of at the project level, but then we take it up to the systems level. You'll be aware that we have been working with the Global ABC and UNEP and UN Habitat on these climate action roadmaps for buildings and construction toolkit. So this is with countries at both the national and the subnational level. And we work with them to develop their own roadmaps. And they cover the 5 action areas. And this is their strategic priorities: urban planning, constructing new and existing buildings, and the construction supply chain. And this is really about analyzing and prioritizing their sectoral gaps and opportunities. But one of the key challenges has been data, their availability, especially around circularity and the construction supply chain. And that is why we have also been working with partners on the guidance for circularity, which I'll talk about later in this session. But in terms of what's next for us, it's all about rolling these tools, this guidance out, but not just that, because we need to move from plans and from paper to action. How do we actually implement these? And we really want to help in terms of demonstration projects and anything else to move implementation forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We have time for 1 or 2 questions from the audience, I guess. Yeah, according to the schedule I have in front of me at least. Yeah, so depending on how brief you can be with your questions and with the answers, we can maybe take up to 2 questions from the audience. Any takers? If not, we will move forward because there are quite a lot of contributions. Yeah, please.
Is it then okay if I can just share a little bit of an anecdote? And I think it's something we need to be a little bit careful about from Denmark. So in Denmark, we have adapted what we call reduction roadmap on how we mitigate our whole life cycling carbon in the built environment. And the entire industry have joined forces, and they have made and developed this reduction roadmap. They have made targets on how we can actually go towards meeting the Paris agreement. We're really, in the reduction roadmap, pressing our political system in Denmark to be more ambitious. But what the learning is in this discussion is that our political system in the Nordic, they have said, we hear what the industry are saying, but the targets that you're setting are so ambitious that we, from a governmental point of view, is afraid that the building price will be too high. If we are meeting so low energy target, it will require a lot of investment, and the property price will rise. We are talking about a fair transition, so I think it's also something that we need to be a little bit careful about.
Thanks a lot. I'll hand it back to Paul then to take us to the next stage. Thank you.
George, thank you. George, just so that we can clear the screen. Thank you. I actually think we're doing remarkably well in terms of keeping to time, but let's crack on. So we're now going to come to our second round of quickfire presentations of frameworks and solutions. So we're going to hear from, once again, we've just heard from Samantha Stratton-Short from UNOPS, so she will speak in a moment. And I'd like to invite Roland Huntsinger from WBCSD and Matt Black from the World GBC to come up in turn to present your solutions. So I'll come to you first, Samantha.
Great, thank you. Just making sure it's on the right slide. Thank you. So as we've been highlighting so far, buildings, due to the large amount of materials they consume and waste, are pivotal to decarbonizing and promoting resilience in our cities. However, we're currently off track to meet the targets, and this isn't due to technology. This is, we've got the technology for full decarbonization, but the real gap is in action. Governments need support to jump from theory to action, especially around the consumption of materials and the management of their buildings portfolio in evolving economies where half of the buildings are yet to be built. So to support governments to fill this gap, UNOPS is very excited to announce here today that the One Planet Network, in collaboration with UNEP, UNOPS, and with funding from the government of Finland, is launching a toolkit to assess circularity in the building sector at the national level. The National Circularity Assessment Toolkit for Buildings allows governments to evaluate the circularity of their building sector. This toolkit has been the collaborative work of the teams together with 50 international advisors from the public and private sectors, academia, and industrial institutions. And special thanks and support from Arup, who's also here on the panel, to identify the relevant indicators and metrics to address circularity of both physical and enabling environment within the building sector. The National Circularity Assessment Toolkit for Buildings is a holistic assessment of the 5 sectors across the 5 action areas that I mentioned for the previous roadmaps. So that's the strategic priorities, spatial and urban planning, new buildings, existing buildings, and the construction supply chain. It focuses on materials and building design, aiming to understand and improve material and waste flows, environmental footprint, and economic and social impact. So, I'm not quite sure where I'm supposed to aim. The toolkit analyzes both the physical environment, the buildings that we see, and the enabling environment. So that's everything that supports the change and guides decisions within the building sector. It consists of a quantitative and a qualitative assessment with specific guidance to calculate metrics and a digital questionnaire to perform the qualitative assessment. The analysis shows the gaps in the sector, including the gaps in the enabling environment, to support the prioritization of actions. The toolkit is now available on the One Planet Network website. We believe this guidance, developed through an iterative process involving experts, stakeholders, pilot testing in Ghana and Bangladesh, will support countries to craft actionable roadmaps that contribute to a more sustainable, inclusive, and climate resilient future. I encourage you all to take a look. Thank you.
Hello, good afternoon. Thank you very much for having me. I'm Roland. I'm Director Built Environment at the World Business Council for Sustainable Development. We're a global member-centric organization with 250 global companies in our membership. And my program is particularly focusing on all these discussions here. I also have the honor of co-chairing the Global Alliance for Building Steering Committee together with Yves Laurent. So very much embedded in all these discussions. I just wanted to very briefly talk about something very complementary to what Samantha has just shared with us. A national level approach for measuring circularity. We're working on a building level approach for measuring the circularity of buildings. We call it, is there another mic? I'll just take it because thank you. Then I can read from here. We call it the Circular Transition Indicators for Buildings, based on our CTI methodology. I think the numbers you see on this slide, we all know them, but I think it is important that we really remind ourselves. We had a discussion on sufficiency this morning. We need to manage all these impacts and have a just transition. And the circular economy really sits at the heart of this transition. It's a crucial driver so that we better understand how do we fulfill our needs with the minimum amount of resources needed and the minimum impact. Now, we believe that we really need to measure consistently with a standardized approach so that we can start understanding the circularity of buildings and how to improve that. Of course, eventually, we then also need to link that to a target discussion. Circularity is not a goal in itself. Circularity is there to support other goals, like a reduction of CO2 emissions, reduction of pressures on nature, etc. So it's very important that we start with that standardized approach for measuring. So the CTI is the Circular Transition Indicators, a methodology we developed for global companies to assess their circular inflows and outflows so that they better understand how their business can become circular. But that methodology can be very well applied now to buildings, and that is what we are currently doing, to take the CTI that's based on many international standards to the discussion on buildings. And I'm very pleased to say that we're progressing well. We have now started the pilot testing phase of this work, and we're hoping to bring it to next year's World Circular Economy Forum as a first version of this CTI for buildings. What does it look at? You can see here what's currently in scope, we're looking at the material flows across buildings, and for that, we're using a framework that's been out there quite for some time, which we're also using to assess whole life carbon, structure, facade, systems, services, etc. So to really dissect buildings into their relative components so that we can measure each part. It also looks at design for detachability, for reuse, and also energy flow. That is currently in scope, as well as measuring the impact of CO2. We hope that in a future version, so potential version 2, we can then also look at water flow, as well as impacts on nature, and very importantly, the social impact, because we keep talking about this importance of circularity also as an enabler of economic opportunities, etc. I think it would be great if we can also include that in this measurement. So thank you for providing me a few moments to present you with this. And as I said, we're pilot testing it. If there's any interest, potentially, let me know. And then we're taking this forward.
All right, on to the next one. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Matt Black. I'm the Climate Action Manager from the World Green Building Council, and I'm here to give you a very brief 3-minute, Paul, snapshot, starting now, snapshot on Minoro. So what is, Minoro? Minoro is a collaborative effort from Grimshaw Architects, World GBC, WBCSD, and many others. And it's essentially an online platform for the built environment that centralizes the latest guidance, methodologies, and advice on carbon management. And we spent around a year or more collecting technical guidance, reports, all sorts of outputs from different people, and centralizing them under this platform that's been developed by Grimshaw. So important things to recognize so that I can see on the screen. The aim is to really provide businesses, but particularly SMEs who may not have the kind of in-house knowledge and expertise that we are familiar with, mostly in this room, or from industry leaders, and provide them with a platform that gives them actions to maximize carbon reduction across the life cycle of projects. Important to note that it is open source, it's free to use, so we don't want that to be a barrier, particularly when we are talking about SMEs. We want them to be able to access it and use it all around the world. And as I said, it's been curated by experts across the property sector. We will put our hands up and say that at the moment, it is a little bit global north bias. That's been from our initial engagement and the sort of understanding from Grimshaw, but we are in the process of developing further country-specific pathways for other countries across the global south. And why is this important? We all know the context of why we're here. We need to rapidly reduce emissions by 50%. The sector that we work in is complex and fragmented. And really, even though we all know what we're doing, that knowledge is not yet widespread and not yet available, as I've mentioned again, to SMEs and across the world. So the opportunity that Minoro is trying to feed into is really identifying that action, sharing it for free, and getting more accelerated action to happen. So that's the context, and unfortunately I can't really give you a live demonstration, and I've only got 30 seconds left, but what I'm just going to do is give you a few slides of what the website actually looks like. Okay, I've got more time. So you come onto the website, and this is what you're greeted with in terms of the homepage. And as you go into Minoro, what you'll find is this platform. And so this example is broken down, I think, on the UK country pathway, and it's done by the REBA stages. And each one of these boxes is a very basic sort of intervention for people to understand, how do I make these decisions? If I've got no idea where to start, this might help you understand where to start. That's my timer. As I said, we've got multiple country pathways, and we're looking to expand it. But if we click through, What you'll see here down the bottom is there are different intervention points depending on what stakeholder you are and also what stage of the project you're at. So you can select those, and for example, if you're an architect or if you're a project manager, it will then highlight what are the most important intervention stages for you to take note of. And then when you eventually do click on one of these boxes, what will come up is the guidance that we've collected. There you go. So you'll get a box that will go down into some sort of high-level global guidance on how you should go about implementing this action. And when you scroll through, it will go down to country-level guidance. And I think this is really important because, you know, it is relevant at a global stage, at a high level, but we want to get as much country-specific guidance in there as possible. And that's why we've been collaborating with a lot of green building councils from across the world, GBC Network, and other organizations to ensure that it's populated as much as we can with their technical guidance, relevant government and other industry organization guidance as well. So, that's a very quick snapshot. I encourage you to go and take a look on the website. There's a few flyers floating around on some chairs for you to scan a QR code. And really the call to action is if you are interested in supporting us to develop this further, to get in touch, because it's going to be a really collaborative effort to keep this updated and to make sure it's shared with the people who need it most. So yeah, pass you back to you, Paul.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much indeed, Matt and Roland and Samantha for those insights. Now, by some sort of freak, everybody's been remarkably well behaved, and we're in very good shape in terms of time. So we do have some time for Q&A. So we have our panel back here, and I'm going to hand back over to Nazakat to facilitate. So please do think about your questions.
Okay, great. While I give you some time to think about the questions, I will start with my questions using the privilege of being the moderator of such an excellent panel. I want to just quickly highlight that a red line that I'm carrying across the session today is that solutions are in place. We really need to focus on mechanisms for scaling them, and thanks a lot for presenting a lot of the interesting indicators, tools, and the reports that could help us to make sure that the means are there to achieve the outcomes, to make sure that we're Paris aligned as a sector. And with that, I would like to go a bit more into the detail of some of the solutions that have been put forward today. Samantha, if I could start with you, please. So you presented to us the National Circularity Assessment Framework for Buildings, which provides an important baseline information on the status of circularity in a country's built environment sector. The information is essential to inform decision-making and national strategies, policies, and roadmaps for the implementation of the circular strategies. What action is needed to scale up the use of the National Circularity Assessment Framework for buildings in as many countries as possible? So,
thank you. Thank you for that question. And yeah, so scaling up is absolutely essential, as we know. And all of these good ideas and good tools are just the start. I mean, the first thing that's part of the process is reducing the operational carbon related to carbon-related energy emissions. But the second one is actually breaking down into pieces how we address sustainability and environmental impact across the entire life cycle of buildings, and to build this into national strategies. The key actions that we would say are what we should be focusing on would be the first would be to advocate for these assessments and roadmaps, and part of that is actually having the tools and the guidance so that people can easily access them and get to work with them. The second thing is strengthening data availability and the ability to forecast. And where we've seen the challenges here is like what is the country's building forecast for the next years? What is the existing building stock? What percentage of the materials in the construction sector are wasted? How much is recycled? All of this data is largely absent or very hard to get hold of, and this will be key to actually scaling up. And of course, third, something that we hear a lot about at this COP is bridging the financing gap for implementing in the building sector. And you're probably all aware that they estimate it will need about $1 trillion for building retrofits and new construction. And we have to find a way of making sure that the buildings are included in these national plans so that that money can actually be accessed. In terms of what we've been doing already, we have a couple pilots in Ghana and Bangladesh. In Ghana, we've been supporting the government with implementation of demonstration projects on low carbon housing initiatives at the district level. And this came out through the roadmap process, that this was a priority for Ghana. And so, yeah, so that's been like a focus in terms of a demonstration project. And then in Bangladesh, it's been more around the certification process. So this has been about enhancing this for low carbon innovative materials and to establish new certifications for sustainable buildings. And in both of those pilots, we've been doing capacity building around energy efficiency and eco-innovation, all about scaling this up. So, all around scaling up circularity.
Thank you so much, and thanks for providing such an alive and practical example of how the roadmap translates into demonstration projects or really accelerates the usage of the lower carbon materials. Peter, I will come back to you again on the question about the unification across the regions. And I would really like to take your view on what do you think is the role of the frameworks such as the circular transition indicators for buildings and the Minoro in unifying the sector with the context of the circular economy to support its long-term goals?
If I can start on the can you hear us? Yeah. Okay. I will try. It's not working. I think it's breaking up.
It is a bit shaky, the mic. Maybe we have another. We have another one here.
Well, let's try. So I'll try with the CTI first.
Yes.
What I think is absolutely great. It's built for business, by business. So it have a economic incentive, and that's the driver of circularity. Not only it have an economic incentive, it's also a framework that the corporates can use to have a more resilient operation. It can help de-risking the supply chain. It can hopefully in the future both be addressing the climate impact as well as the pressure on nature. And I really look forward for next year when EU are rolling out new requirements to whole life cycling carbon assessment, where nature and biodiversity will be integrated into that framework. We're starting to set price on nature. We're starting to set price on biodiversity. And the CTI is a platform that Arup would definitely like to use and experience with. And I think it's really well structured. The Miro platform, I will lead it to others. I need to look into more of that, what they provide.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
But I hear loud your message that with the business at the heart of it and the economic incentives at the heart of it, we can make sure that it really provides what is needed for the sector to transition. And with that, I would like to bring a bit more of the policy and the regulatory perspective. Mr. George, could I ask you, what, in the context of Kenya and the broader East African regions, how can policy and regulatory frameworks be designed to effectively measure and promote circularity in the construction sector? Do you have in mind any specific metrics or tools that you think are necessary to assess the circularity, and how can this be integrated into national or regional building standards?
Wow, thank you very much for 3 hot questions. Number one, I think listening and, of course, building on what my other colleagues have been able to share, I must re-emphasize one thing, that for any policy to be effective, it must be addressing a problem. Secondly, it has also to have interlinkage, because the dangers that I've seen most of the time is approaching matters from a single lens. So for me, for policies to be effective and more impactful, it has to have a system thinking, looking at the entire value chain, because listening in, there are processes that needs to begin at the base all the way to the end. For Kenya, we've been basically trying to grapple around the same. We have a climate agenda to deliver. We have a building crisis demands to be achieved. We have an economy that is supposed to be grown. So what we are proposing then is that framework should be able to trigger more or less actions, not at the same pace, but at least at all those nodes, so that by the end of the day, we are moving in a more collaborative way. So I think that's one proposal that I think, for me, that's how I would design policy, and already we've engaged together with our partners in country, and I know regionally, to have that more or less system thinking of how do you advance that. On the issue of whether I have a specific tool that I have preference on, I would want to be very honest, I have none. But I think the caution I want to throw into that discussion is it's good to have systems, it's good to have tools, but then it has to be have the ability to be usable, even with the least complicated data. Because what I've seen is we would always want to build a very precise system that demands a huge tons of data that may not be easily available. So the usability, and of course the knowledge that needs to go into that. Because for it to be impactful, it should be able to be easily usable by quite a number of people. And I know there are some that are freely available. There are some that are for business. But I think my understanding over time is that it has to be a tool that can speak to the needs and more so flexible in how it's being used. Lastly, in terms of Kenya and the region, I think I alluded to that the integration into the existing plans and the strategies could be the best way of ensuring that things work. Of course, at times, putting in the requisite policy environments is a tedious process. It is consultative, it's costly, and therefore plugging into the already known to work towards the unknown, I think, is the best. The next other issue is the whole issue of capacity building and creating opportunities for people to learn and adopt. And I believe my colleague from UNEP just alluded that to having models that people can see and resonate with, then slowly now we should be able to influence the bigger system in a way that is more progressive. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Such important points. With the extensive value chain that the buildings are, we definitely really need to integrate the systems thinking into it and keep it on top of mind that the buildings and policies around that exist within the social and economic context and within the needs that we need from the buildings to deliver for people. So with that in mind, I would like to bring back also the perspective of the industry, but also focus really on the small and medium enterprises which dominate the building sector very often. So what do you think, Nasra, if I could get your perspective, on the solutions that we've discussed here today, or broader solutions play in terms of what role do they play for accelerating the decarbonization of buildings? And are there ways that we could actually communicate the solutions better to the SMEs, make sure that they are reaching from being the solutions into practice and really get scaled up?
Thank you. I think I'll start off by saying what I feel is a huge gap, which is very simple but very hard at the same time, is we often don't sit with SMEs to ask them, what is your problem? we assume we have a solution before we've asked them what their problem is. And I think that gap sometimes means that we're creating solutions which will never be scaled because we never incorporated that voice when we are crafting these solutions. And that then means the people who could be the champions of a solution we're crafting are not involved in that process, which defeats the very thing we're trying to achieve. And so with the Minoro, what I see as an opportunity here, I know Matt said it's a very global north centered now, but as we're thinking about the global south, the SMEs are really the backbone of a lot of global south businesses. I see an opportunity here for us to, number one, have workshops to first ask the fundamental question. What is it that SMEs need? What is your barrier to achieving prosperity? Having that very broad conversation with them then will highlight the bigger problems they have that unifies them in their quest to become successful. And then, once we have an understanding of their problems, craft capacity building sessions or trainings that allow them to unlock these opportunities. And then introduce the tools, because we would have introduced the tools in a way that we are responding, not simply kind of ambushing them with tools that might not be utilized. So I think with Minoro, we have an opportunity then, once we've had that conversation, to craft and develop case studies that can then make Minoro work and serve these SMEs in the global south. But aside from that, the assessment tools can then be utilized for these SMEs to gain access to financing and opportunities that are often something that they can't or feel they can't be part of in the sustainability conversation. And I think what that can do then is truly create a coalition of SMEs who are powerful in showcasing what sustainability could look like. Generally for SMEs, but also more specifically for the built environment, where I see a powerful collaboration here between the Ministry of Environment, the Ministry for Housing and Trade coming together, and of course forestry. So in some countries that's together with environment, and in some it's not. And I don't think the built environment is strictly a Ministry of Housing issue. Mm-hmm. It's a cross-cutting issue, and I think that's been missed out in our approach. So if we can come together and say, this is how we want to improve the lives of our people, this is how we want to improve SMEs, then we can unlock very collaborative opportunities at a subnational, national, and eventually regional and global. And I think that's what's really missing. And then lastly, how can we then, once we're clear on that, leverage partnerships and the digital economy in translating opportunities? Because in Africa, what is super important is now everyone is using a mobile phone. We might not have fancy gadgets, but the mobile phone is super accessible, and we have something called M-Pesa, where mobile payments is one of the fastest way SMEs get to interact with their consumers. So I think that's a powerful way of changing the game and disrupting the conversation with Global South in mind. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Nasra. I hear it also that we do not only need all hands on deck, but we also make sure that all voices are around the table and their needs are represented. And I also see the thread around the capacity and capability building, and that being really central if we are to transition this industry. So with that in mind, with collaboration being central to AGC's sustainability strategy, I would like to ask Ms. Chiaki Okimura, how partnerships with industry leaders, governments, and research institutions enhanced your ability to implement circular economy practices, and what opportunities do you see for broader collaboration within the glass sector?
Thank you for the question. The collaboration in our entire supply chain is quite essential for AGC. So, in fact, we already have a lot of collaboration with within our value chain, including our government, also the competitors, and also our institution. For example, AGC has collaborated with the Saint-Gobain. Maybe that is a more famous than the AGC. Yeah. To develop the new type of the glass melting furnace. The other case is our subsidiary in Singapore. It's the regional partner of the World Green Building Council. And also in the case of Japan, we are collaborating with Minoro, which is a Japanese research institution, to develop their new glass melting technology using ammonia. So through this collaboration, we could achieve a lot of the innovation. And also another case samples, we are showcasing our glass recycling technology, using the waste glass from the demolished and renovated building glass, and also the discarded PV panel into the architecture, the glass products. So we are showcasing that one in the C5 at the Japan Pavilion. So just 1 minute walk from here. So please do visit us, our booth.
Thanks a lot. Great to hear how the concept of collaboration that we often talk about works in the case of the concrete industry and of the concrete company. With that, I would love to open to you all for questions. You've heard quite a range of inputs and ideas, and I'm sure some of you have questions to ask, and we have some time for it, so don't be shy, be the force mover. Go ahead. Yes, please, Melanie.
Hello, yes, I was really inspired by what you were saying, Nazra, about cross-cutting government. It's a cross-cutting issue, and it kind of related back to what the Japanese minister was showing with this council across ministries. And so I was wondering if any of you have any other examples of this happening, and how, this just sounds like a really exciting way of doing it, and if the plans are to do this in Kenya as well, for example.
Sorry there. Yeah, I think, so that's what we're working on in Kenya, actually. So one of the things that we're hoping to do is to bring together the commitments that Kenya has. So we have the Buildings Breakthrough, we have the Forest Climate Leadership, and Building Climate Resilience for the Urban Poor. So all these commitments essentially mean that Kenya has to showcase leadership in the context of resilience, in the context of the materials we're using. I don't see those things in isolation. So what we're trying to see is, can we bring all these players who have the common goal of making Kenya showcase leadership come together and craft potentially a pilot that will speak to not just the commitments, but the impacts and the materials? Because all those are really tools to help you achieve what you want. So we're working on it, and I'd be happy to give you an update maybe 6 months in. But ultimately, I think we're too stuck on labels. And I think sometimes being, very reactive to saying, well, I'm an architect or I'm a lawyer, defeats what you're really there to do, which is to deliver impact or money, or whatever it is that's driving you. And if you can focus on what brings you together, I think, then the collaborations are easy. You won't be picking the different ministries. They come kind of flowing to you. So it will be interesting to explore that. So we're working on a workshop, I think it's next week, actually, where it will be standards for green buildings and affordable housing. We're also exploring financing, and we're hoping that we'll bring our forestry guys in so that it's a loop. And it's not happening in isolation. We move quicker when we move together, and we create bigger impact. Thank you.
Great. Peter, you wanted to add something?
Yeah, it was just an idea. I got so much inspiration from all the panelists. So thank you so much for that. One thing which came into my mind was that we have our net zero targets on national level, but we don't have a circular economy target. And in order for bringing that momentum into place, we need to enforce that. The CTI is a really good framework to move towards these national circularity targets. The circularity gap report, as circular economy have developed, is a very strong framework, and it was an eye-opener for many countries, including Denmark. We just saw into our assessment report, our gap report, and Denmark was only 5% circular. We are a group of stakeholders now trying to pressure our government to set a determined target. Perhaps just half of what the Netherlands is. They are 22% circular. So if we can start to kind of compete on our national circularity target, I think that can bring a lot of the stakeholders together and really set a lot of these frameworks in place. But we kind of need to have a leading target to move towards.
Get a bit of a competition in the realm to make sure the action drives forward. Okay, any more questions from the audience?
If I may,
Okay.
I'll take the opportunity maybe to give a plug and also ask a question of the panel. So as I say, Paul King from Built by Nature. This year, and it was really, I was just prompted by something Nazra was just saying about SMEs and listening and understanding what they really need. Over the course of the last year, Built by Nature ran its inaugural bio-based prize, where we sought applications from around the world for tested but scalable bio-based construction materials. So we said they've got to have been tested on an actual building, but not mainstreamed or not scaled in any way. And we had no idea what sort of reaction we were going to get. In the event, after 2 months, we had almost 300 applications from across 4 continents, across Africa, Asia, South America, as well as Europe, and almost 30 different materials within that. It's an extraordinary array, including some of the obvious ones, like bamboo and straw and hemp, but looking at mycelium and typha and seaweed and a wide variety. We're now working with some of the shortlisted and winning applicants in a mentoring program, which is all about identifying what do they actually experience as the main barriers. For some of them, it's about getting certification. For some of them, it's about technical barriers to increasing production. For others, it's about attracting investment and so on and so forth. But it's highlighted to me, I guess, the importance of how we can build a community there and share information in that space. So I would simply say, have a look. If you want to find out more about the Built by Nature prize, have a look at our website. We have a brochure about the winners. We have a map of where the winners and shortlisted came from, and that's builtbn.org. My question, though, to the panel is one of sort of cultural sensitivity, I guess. One of the things that increasingly, as I talk to people about these issues, say to me is, look, in many parts of the world, concrete, steel, glass, shiny buildings have become synonymous with development. And we are trying to get people to rethink that. And in many instances, we're trying to encourage people to go back to using traditional materials and methods, albeit in a modern context. And, as I say, this is something that, and I've spoken to people working in Nicaragua, in India, in Africa, in Bhutan, and they're all facing this challenge in slightly different ways. And I would just really welcome ideas from anyone on the panel about how we can perhaps approach this and encourage people to perhaps embrace traditional methods and materials and help to promote the idea of seeing these materials in a modern and, of course, low-carbon context.
For that great question. Nasra, would you want to go first? Yes.
Great question. I think the same way we have sustainability as a global north kind of focused conversation, if we disrupt it to be global south focused, then a lot of people will be proud of what they're doing in the localized context. If we make it cool to be African, to be Middle Eastern, whatever it is that you represent, and say there's an opportunity in reclaiming that narrative, then the opportunities will flow. I think for the longest time, probably last 20 years, because those developmental global north focused, even what we were taught in school was in alignment with the global north approach, which means then leaving behind what you've known traditionally as something that works locally so that you can compete at a global stage. But can that be disrupted to say, Now, if you think of your culture as part of what sets you apart for sustainability and the opportunities to unlock finance for that kind of thinking, then I think we'll really see traction. And I think culture as a component of the S in ESG when it comes to reporting could be explored. And I think if we do that, then we'll have a lot more champions saying, bring back the narrative. Local is powerful and global is collaboration. So I think, yeah.
Thanks a lot. Such a fundamental point on reclaiming the narrative. And it's actually a first for me to hear about culture becoming part of the S in ESG. Really, thanks.
In Denmark, we are going to have a new climate plan for our capital region, Copenhagen. It will be put in place in 2025. And one of the target is really to look into scope 3 emissions. So the target is to reduce it by 50%, going from 10 tons to 5 tons. I know it's a kind of a stick from a municipality perspective, but it's also a stick which are changing the culture. That being having a cautious lifestyle, reduced lifestyle, a good lifestyle, fair lifestyle, that means a lot to a lot of people in Copenhagen. And one of the examples we can actually see that we have a very, very unique neighborhood called the Resource Rows, purely been developed by recycled material. What is really remarkable is that the housing price actually around 20 to 22% higher than the rest of the nearby houses. People want to live in these houses, which are made out of old tiles, old windows, old doors, old wood, because it's their identity. Climate cautiousness is a part of their DNA now, and when they have their dinner with friends, they talk about where they live. I think that's the culture shift that we will see.
So the sticks and the policy need to be combined with the culture and that shift as well. Please.
I think for me, I would contribute 2 points. Number one is the issue of culture and behavior change. Because from where I come from, if you are living in a house that doesn't have concrete, glass, steel, you are poor. So that needs to change. And part of the thinking that we're having as a country is to say it's cool because it's good for climate. That's number one. Number two, and my colleague from Denmark just alluded to, or he was explicit in his presentation earlier. It's damn expensive to build with bio-based materials. So we have also to design products and materials that is comparatively affordable compared to other building materials. I think with those two, we would hit the right direction. Thank you.
Great, thank you so much. We need to redefine what is cool for the buildings. Any more questions from the audience? Otherwise, there is a space. If you're willing to take it. Otherwise, I'll pass it to Paul to take us to the next stage. Thank you so much. It was so inspiring to moderate this panel. Thanks a lot.
Thank you all. Okay. We will now just come to our last speaker, who is going to wrap up this session. Delighted to welcome Professor Usha Raniga from RMIT. I apologize for the pronunciation of your name. Please, Usha.
Yes. Well, thanks for that introduction, Paul. Usha Raniga is my name, and I'm Professor of Sustainable Built Environment at RMIT University in Melbourne, Australia. Three words pop in my mind listening to the conversations that have been taking place over the last few days. Urgency, action, and collaboration. And these three things have been repeated over and over again in any of the conversations, particularly pertaining to the built environment that I've been part of. So what I'd like to do is two things. I've been tasked with explaining to you a little bit about where the circularity journey in the built environment started. And it started through a program called the Sustainable Buildings and Construction Program that was part of one of the 6 programs of the One Planet Network. So the Buildings Program started in 2015, so even before the Sustainable Development Goals came into effect, and certainly before it was sexy to be involved in circularity in the buildings and construction area. So what I'm doing today is actually talking a little bit more about our journey, our story, a little bit about looking in the rearview mirror, because it's important for us to understand what these learnings are so that we can move forward effectively, again, with a sense of urgency, action, and collaboration. It's a very busy slide, but I'll just take you through the key highlights from the slide. So as I said at the start, when we started the program, we brought in 3 major leads. The Ministry of Environment Finland, so Finland was the lead of the program, with RMIT University as one of the co-leads, and UNEP as the third co-lead. Initially, the World Green Building Council were part of this process, but eventually they became not as a lead or a co-lead, but they continued the work as part of the Multi-Stakeholder Advisory Committee. So we started with the 3 at the start. And then we had a group of about 20 people that helped us understand and define where we need to take the sustainable buildings and construction sector. And then we refined that further with other network partners. So by the end of the program, we had the 3 co-leads. We had about 20 multi-stakeholder advisory committee members that came from different parts of the world. And towards the end, we also started focusing a lot of our work on circularity in the built environment. But the one thing that we were very keen to do right from the very start was to look at how can we help the Global South. We were very, very conscious right from the start that the Global South is where the rapid city building activity is taking place. So we were really interested in understanding and learning from fast-tracking what are the issues from the Global North that we can learn from, take that into the Global South. So we are fast-tracking and leapfrogging some of the work that the Global South is doing. So a lot of our policies, programs, activities were focusing on the Global South, but we also did a few things from the Global North, and I'll take you through some of them. So just as an example, the blue bits that you can see, the blocks on the slide here, they look at some of the tools and programs that we developed out of funds from the trust fund that came from the 10xP board for the One Planet Network of the SBC program. So we focused, for instance, on materials. We did not focus specifically on bio-based materials, but we were pushing our countries and our stakeholders to start looking at moving away from high embodied emitting materials such as concrete. On the other hand, where it was pretty evident that concrete was going to continue to be used as a building material, we started working with them to see how could we introduce ideas of low emissions concrete. So how can we green the concrete industry a little bit more? And that's what, for instance, the Latin American countries decided to do. The material work that we did was based in India, and some of that work has now been taken up. You heard earlier from Samantha, who talked about the CTI tool. That has now been taken up by that tool. Some of the other things that we did in terms of the Sherpa tool, which was led by UN Habitat, was a development. And yes, it was not just about social and environmental and economic, but we also introduced a cultural element to that tool. So the Sherpa tool was developed by UN Habitat and a number of other countries such as Nepal, and countries in Africa, and it was done with the University of Cambridge to ensure that we brought in that cultural element in the development of the tool. So these are just 3 examples, but there were others. So the Ministry of Environment Finland assisted with 2 more projects. One was based in Egypt, and that was looking at the intersection between planning and building of the place in Egypt called the Napta Smart Community, and the other project was looking at the Abura Valley in Colombia, where we looked at the intersection between planning and building. So it's not just about building; buildings don't stand on their own, but it's also intersects with some of the planning regulations. So how can we bring in planning and building regulations to align in a much more sustainable and low environmental impact manner? We spent a lot of our time over the last few years, so from 2018 onwards to 2022, looking at circularity. And then when the Sustainable Development Goals were introduced in 2016, we started looking at how can we map and we can work together with the SDGs. And we did this, and these are just some examples of some of the work that we did. We did not want to use the use of the word demolition, because demolition of buildings denotes a negative value for the materials that are already used in buildings. So we started using the word deconstruction in buildings. And you can see the circle on the left-hand side of the slide here that talks about how we may not have a lot of influence upstream where materials are coming from, but that's something that we're working on now as part of the circular built environment work. But we're focusing more on how can we, if you're looking at retrofitting buildings, looking at how can we design buildings for life, how can we ensure that the buildings are deconstructed so that these materials can be used over and over again. That's a smaller circle that you see at the bottom left-hand side. And that is some of the work that has gone into shaping the 10 whole life cycle recommendations that were introduced in the earlier panel, as well as by some of the things that Emma talked about earlier. We also looked at what are the key instruments, key SDGs at a goal level that we can look at that will help us in this transition towards sustainability. So it's, even though the program was sitting under SDG 12 and SDG 8, we were interested in things like SDG 13 on climate change, SDG 14 on biodiversity, SDG 7 on energy, SDG 6 on water, because we do use a lot of water in buildings, and these resources are often not considered or talked about in discussions. And then we did a global survey with the help of the World Green Building Council and the World Business for Sustainable Development. And through the survey of about 200 from across the world, we looked at what are the indicators that can help us assist in this transition using the SDGs. And we came up with 5 core indicators and 9 secondary indicators that you can see on the graph here. And just to also add that we did a number of state-of-play reports that were launched at the World Built Environment Conference in 2020 in Sweden. It was done online because of COVID. And each of these reports focused on different regions. So we had one for Asia, one for Africa, one for Latin America, Gulf Cooperation Council countries, Oceania, North America, Europe, and then we brought it all together with a set of global policies and principles that can assist with circularity in the built environment. So all this is captured in a book, which you can download for free, thanks to the assistance of the Finland government. And it's really a book that is looking at the story, and to ensure that other global programs, such as the Sustainable Buildings and Construction Program, or even if you're looking at it from a policy context in your own country, how can these programs help you get to your goal faster? Don't make the same mistakes that other people have done. Leapfrog from the work that we have already done so that it'll help you get to your journey much faster. So I'll just spend the last few minutes talking about where to from here and what have we learned from the panel discussions. Again, urgency of the problem, the importance of action, and the importance of collaboration. This has to be done across all levels. It has to be done, yes, at a global level through things like the COP, but it also needs to be done at a country level through things like the nationally determined contributions. And a number of countries, as we heard earlier today from Oliver, a number of different countries are not actually considering the role of the built environment. And this is particularly the case for countries that are in Asia, Africa, and Latin America that are still looking at agriculture or the energy sector and not really thinking about the built environment. Really, really important to start thinking about putting the built environment into the map of some of these nationally determined contributions. And thinking about it at a building block level, that is important. That level of scaling is important. We need to think about how these materials could be used in a building, but perhaps continue to be used over multiple life cycles in different buildings down the track. So thinking about it from a whole life cycle perspective, thinking about it from the perspective of design, thinking about the materials that come from upstream, but also thinking about what happens downstream is important. And buildings need to be designed such that they could be adapted over and over again. So an office building, I come from Australia, and we have got almost half the vacancy rates of office buildings in Sydney, Melbourne, and Brisbane that we had before COVID because of hybrid working arrangements. So there's a lot of empty spaces that are available. How do we use these? Can we readapt these buildings? But what do we need to do in order to be able to do that? We need to get support from local government authorities and from the planners to be able to adapt these buildings. And this is where building codes and building regulations become very important. So with that, I'll hand you over back to Paul. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Usha. That is the end of this session. I think it's been a very varied and stimulating session. I guess one take-home thought for me is that, I guess the root of the problem that we face in terms of global climate change and biodiversity loss is our apparent disconnection from nature. And it seems to me that the more that we look into a broader palette of materials and where these materials come from and where they're going, the more it reconnects us back to nature and at a local level. And I think that connection of local culture and local nature, I think, is a really provocative thought to take away in terms of how we rethink our built environment going forward. I want to thank all of the panelists. I won't name them all now, there have been many, but once again for the contributions. Thank you very much for keeping to time, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thanks very much.